Today's video is going to be covering a couple different techniques. The main technique is going to be a blackout technique using a 3D embossing folder, but I wanted to experiment with some colors for this fall themed embossing folder that I have. I'm also going to be playing with some sparkle gels so I can add a little bit of shine to my project. And be sure to stick around to the end of the video where I am going to be sharing my "What would I do different" portion of the video. If you're interested in any of the supplies that I'm using today, I will have them linked down below in the video description and over on my blog. The products that I'm going to be using today is the Leafy Wreath 3D embossing folder from Simon Says Stamp and also the Small Thanks stamp set with its coordinating die. Before I begin experimenting with colors, I am going to emboss a piece of white cardstock first. Now, my sandwich that I'm using with my Platinum 6 is the main platform, the B plate, the platform top, and then I'm also going to be using a shim. So I have some Hammermill Cardstock, and I'm going to spritz the back of it with a light spray of water and then place that inside of my 3D embossing folder. I'll place that down onto my Spellbinders Platinum 6, and I'm using a sandwich that Nicole Spohr actually had recommended. She literally takes the packaging from the 3D embossing folder and places that over the top, and it applies a perfect amount of pressure. Now, once in a while, I do notice that the design isn't all the way embossed, like towards the bottom of the cardstock. So I lately have been flipping my embossing folder, placing that cardstock piece back over the top and then running it through again. So the bottom is going in first. And I find I've been getting absolutely amazing results with that little trick. Now, this would look amazing using fall colors, but I feel like I do that a lot. So I wanted to experiment with a different spectrum of color. For that, I'm going to be using Sweet Corn, Jelly Bean Green, and Blue Sky. All of these inks are from Gina K Designs, and I'm going to start by flipping the cardstock over. So this side of the panel is actually where it is debossed. So the design is pushed down into the cardstock. And then I'm taking a small blending brush and I'm going to start picking up that ink and really applying it heavily into that embossed area. With the yellow, I kind of scattered it around the wreath, and then I'm going to come in next with Jelly Bean Green, kind of getting a little bit of an overlap with that sweet corn. I want to make sure I'm leaving space for all the colors that I picked out. Now, once I have the Jelly Bean Green, I will move on to Blue Sky, which is a really nice bright blue. And again, making sure I get an overlap in there because I don't want any distinct lines on there. So I want to get the overlap to make it a nice transition. Next, I'm going to take my Versafine Karat Nocturne Ink pad. So it is a heavily saturated ink pad, and I'm going to drag this across the front of my cardstock. I'm going to be protecting my fingers with a Post-it note. I'm also rolling up my sleeve so I don't drag my arm into any of this ink because this ink does stay wet a little longer than most inks do. And especially since I am applying a heavy amount of this ink, it's really going to stay wet for a little while longer. So you're going to want to give it some time to dry. Now, for the most part, I am dragging my ink pad across the front of the cardstock, but in the more open areas, I'm going to be just kind of doing some little circular motions with the ink pad, trying to get it into all those nooks and crannies. Once I have a nice application of ink, I'm going to set it off on the side to dry for a little while and kind of start looking at my sentiment. Here's the panel once it has dried. You can see the black did dry back just a little bit. And I'm using the Small Thanks stamp set. I find this would be a great staple in your collection if you like to send thank you notes. There are a few different fonts, and then there are a lot of smaller kind of single-lined sentiments in there. It was actually really hard to choose which one to use. I really, really loved the thanks that had the heart on the end, but I wasn't sure how it would look with my project. So I'm going to stamp a couple of them just to try them out. I condition the stamp with my thumb just by rubbing my hand over it, and then I'm stamping this once again on Hammermill cardstock using that same Versafine ink. I'll use the coordinating die, line them up over these sentiments, hold them down with a low tack tape, and die cut the two thanks out. Now for the skinny sentiment, I am using my sentiment labels die to die cut that out so it is perfectly lined up straight. When I was die cutting, I die cut out the thanks 2 more times from white cardstock and layered it together so I have a stacked sentiment. I ended up going with the thanks that is more of a typewriter feel because I felt that swirly heart at the end was a little more whimsical and this had more of a vintage vibe to it. I thought I would take a detail blending brush and try and fill in some of the nooks and crannies that I may have missed earlier. And while that's drying, I'm going to bring this over to my splat box and I'm splattering it with some iridescent shimmer spray. I just felt like it needed a little something to it, so I splattered that onto the background. And now to attach this to a card front, I cut out a piece of black foam to be just about the same size as my card front, which is 4¼ by 5½. I'm lining the back of my panel with liquid glue. I'm going to place the foam over the top of the liquid glue, and then I'll place something heavy on it and let it sit for a couple minutes. I find this gives me a really great full coverage of my card front, especially with all of that embossed area. Once I let that sit, I will add more liquid glue to the back of that black craft foam and add this to a side folding card base. After that's attached, I also put something heavy on it. It's usually just a couple books and let that sit for a couple minutes. I'm using a T-square ruler to attach my sentiments. I have my ruler kind of lined up already where I want that first sentiment to go. All I need to make sure and do is keep the margins even on the right and left hand side. And then I'll move my ruler down and add that single strip sentiment underneath. So while I was doing that, I was thinking about how I could add some sparkle to the wreath itself. And I'm going to be digging out my sparkle gel. This is from Gina K Designs in the 14 karat. Now, it looks kind of goopy, I guess is the best word to say it. But what it is a gel with gold glitter in it. So it's going to, I don't know if I want to say looks creamy, but once it's dry, it's going to look like a complete gold glitter application. I'm actually using the lid that's in there, picking up a little bit of that glitter gel and using my finger to kind of smush that onto the leaves. You want to make sure you spread that out really well because even though you may see the gel at first when it's still wet, once it dries, it's going to be completely clear and it's going to be left with all of this beautiful glittery goodness. Now, one thing I would probably change about this is I would not use that detail blending brush to add into the nooks and crannies of the inside of the wreath. It did give me a slight black variation because it's a little more heavier handed. Didn't ruin the card project, but just something I would have left off. And then while this was an experimentation of color, I'm looking back and thinking I would have gone with maybe a darker or bolder green. I feel like the yellow and the green just weren't different enough for them to be kind of separated in color. Now, it doesn't mean that the card project is ruined or that I wouldn't use it, but it is something I would do differently or if you plan on remaking this project. I hope you enjoyed these tips that I shared with you today. Thank you so much for watching. Here is another video that I think you might enjoy.